This is the DinoFAX, a place where I've always talked about dinosaurs or other prehistoric creatures and some other topics here and there. My whole page is based on dinosaurs, but aside from a few curious cats here and there, I don't think I've ever given out my full list of favorite dinosaurs. Now, why would that be important? Well, I'm glad you asked. The thing is, people having favorite dinosaurs can really get them invested and interested in science and dinosaurs and paleontology as a whole. Let's not be coy here, they're almost like Pokemon at this point. Everybody has a favorite dinosaur, and there's no shame in that. Why would there be? There are so many cool and interesting creatures out there, and by having a favorite, it drives people to learn and want to discover more. And sure, it could lead to debate, rivalries, and even arguments, even up to the academic level, but that can be good or even potentially bad, but it's still progressive. There are so many cool and amazing creatures out there, so today I'll tell you my top 10 favorite of these dinosaurs. That being said, the animals I picked are just the ones I enjoy the most, and I'm by no means saying that these are the top 10 best dinosaurs by any means. I try not to disparage anyone's choice when it comes to their favorite animals, and all dinosaurs are equally worthy of being someone's favorite or among their favorites. Like I said, there are so many cool and unique dinosaurs, so make sure if you have some of the same favorites that I do, you let me know in the comments below, and if you don't see your favorites on this list, let me know which ones they are also in the comments below. With that all being said, let's just dive right in with our number 10. For a multitude of reasons, coming in at number 10 for me is Deinocheirus mirificus, a giant ornithomimosaur. When I say giant, that's no joke. Deinocheirus comes from Asia, and it's in fact the largest theropod dinosaur known from that continent, larger than both Tarbosaurus and Pachyrhinosaurus. They are by far the largest of their family, and in fact they're kind of unusually large for an ornithomimid. They could reach 36 feet or 11 meters in length and weigh a whopping 7 tons. Much like Pachyrhinosaurus, Deinocheirus is famous for its massive and ferocious-looking claws and arms, which has often led people less familiar with paleontology to believe the two are related in some way, which they're not. These arms do give the animal its name though, as Deinocheirus means terrible hand. Deinocheirus is believed to have preferred marshy, swampy areas with lots of underwater vegetation that would be easy for their beaks to crop. Their massive claws could be used to uproot underwater plants or even dig up small organisms underneath the water, as they are thought to have been able to consume fish and other small creatures. Aside from that, those massive hands would also be a very useful tool in self-defense, especially against the large, terrifying predators of the time like Tarbosaurus. They are wondrous creatures, and I'm happy to place them at my number 10. Coming in at number 9 is Utahraptor, a bit of a unique case in itself. Many people haven't even heard of this animal, so let me introduce you to the duck raptor. Before we go any further, I'd like to note that there is debate around this animal at the moment, and we don't know for sure if it has a lot of the traits that we thought it did. Anywho, aside from that, these guys also had an unfortunate history at their start because their fossils were originally taken by fossil poachers. The fossil somehow wound up all the way in Belgium, and after they published a study on it, they returned it to the Mongolian authorities. These guys are technically part of the Dromaeosaurids, the group that encompasses Raptor, but a part of a specific line that split off from the others and is actually named after Utahraptor. Utahraptor is called the duck raptor because upon its initial discovery, it was thought to share a lot of traits with waterfowls like mergansers and loons. It was thought that they had webbed feet, reduced forelimbs and tail, and needle-like teeth for smaller organisms. Like I said, unfortunately though, this animal has been plagued with debate, with one very hot-headed paleontologist in the center of it. Healthy debates are a normal and encouraged part of paleontology, but that's not what's happening here. Aside from the duck theory, several other scientists have contested Utahraptor's swimming ability, their flat feet, etc. The main proponent for the duck raptor theory is a paleontologist named Andrea Cao, who is the paleontologist at the center of this debate. He's a good scientist and he's done plenty of amazing work, but he has very personal feelings when it comes to his work. He's the one who named Utahraptor, and he's defended his view of it tooth and nail despite multiple scientists bringing up evidence against him. Cao took personal offense to the paleo artists and scientists who contradicted his views and erupted into tantrums and name-calling and never really apologized for it afterwards. But even all that hot-headed debate doesn't take away from the amazing animal that Utahraptor probably is. They were around the size of a mallard duck and were relatively small dinosaurs overall. If they were semi-aquatic, they likely would have spent a lot of their time in and around the water, diving after prey and living in a manner very similar to loons. If they weren't semi-aquatic, then they may have been small and fast insectivores. As of right now, it's still unclear whether they were completely land-dwelling animals or they were semi-aquatic. But for now, that's just part of the mystery of my 9th favorite dinosaur. Number 8 is truly an amazing dinosaur, and it's honestly one of my favorite creatures, and sometimes I think maybe it is higher on the list, but for now we'll keep it at number 8. This is the stunning Lambeosaurus. Most hadrosaurs can be classified under one of two monikers, the Saurolophinae or the Lambeosaurinae, named after our main man himself. The Lambeosaurinae can be most easily distinguished by their hollow crests, though they do have other differences from the Saurolophinae. Lambeosaurus itself were relatively large animals, reaching up to 25 feet or 7.5 meters in length and weighing in around 3 to 4 tons. Their crests seem to take on a unique shape even among themselves, with some having a more hatchet-like crest and some having a more mitten-like crest. Like Parasaurolophus, there are theories that Lambeosaurus could use this crest for purposes other than display. Like Parasaurolophus, if they did have a use, it was most likely either for display or for making noises. However, as of right now, I haven't found any studies talking about the Lambeosaurus crest or what that crest could potentially be used for. Lambeosaurus and its relatives had a slimmer face, jaw, and beak than their Saurolophine cousins, which might have pointed towards them being more selective feeders. In Lambeosaurus, this was likely an adaptation to the high number of hadrosaurs that lived alongside Lambeosaurus, including Parasaurolophus and Corythosaurus. This would allow them to focus on different plant material and reduce competition in something known as niche partitioning, which a lot of animals do today. For once, it's an herbivore defined not by its predators, but by its contemporaries, and that itself is absolutely fascinating and amazing. Moving on to number 7 is a very unique and interesting dinosaur known as Yichi. They take my number 7 spot for a multitude of reasons, but mainly because they're the closest thing we'll ever get to a real-life dragon, at least what we think of when we think dragons. They are part of a unique lineage of dinosaurs known as the Scansoriopterigidae, a group of dinosaurs with extended fingertips in a similar manner to pterosaurs. Yichi brings this further and shows us that they had a sort of membrane attached to these fingers that would have allowed them to glide. They have a unique wing bone called the styloform bone, which would have jutted out from the wrist and added support to this wing. Another unique feature with Yichi is that it looks like some sort of combination between a bat and a bird, because its wings are thought to be featherless while the rest of its body is definitely covered in feathers. Yichi is an example of convergent evolution on multiple layers. Firstly, the outward appearance of their wings looks very similar to that of bats, though bats use their fingers to support their wings and not a styloform bone. Speaking of the styloform bone, that's the other convergently evolved piece. Styloform bones, or similar, can be found on many species of gliding mammal today, such as the flying squirrel or the greater glider, as well as several extinct animals. They've got a very odd selection of traits, and you can kind of think of Yichi and its family as a sort of test subject before the birds. We're still not entirely sure where the Scansoriopterigidae belong. Even though we know that they're Maniraptorans, we aren't entirely sure what they're most closely related to. While we're not entirely sure where they belong, we know that these animals would have specialized in gliding from tree to tree in search of prey. This method of foraging would eventually lead them to be outcompeted by their much more successful cousins, the birds. Regardless of their extinction, they are an absolutely brilliant creature and shows us many of nature's early experiments before the birds took effect. Coming in at number 6, this is one of the big bad dinosaurs that everyone wants to see, but most people might be surprised that Spinosaurus isn't in its place. But personally, I disagree, and instead I favor this amazing beast, the Suchomimus. Its name literally means crocodile mimic because of its superficial resemblance to crocodilians. Honestly, of all the Spinosaurids, this one is probably the closest to the Spinosaurus that all the Jurassic Park fanboys still want to see. Now, of course, they're not quite as large as Spinosaurus itself, but they aren't small animals either, reaching up to 36 feet or 11 meters in length and weighing in around 5 tons. They had a shorter but thicker neck than their relatives, showing us that they had a lot of muscle in their neck and head. Like Spinosaurus, they had incredibly powerful and well-built arms, each tipped with massive claws, the largest of which could reach up to 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters in length. In any Spinosaurid, these arms are powerful hunting tools, and in Suchomimus, it's no different. Suchomimus, like other Spinosaurids, had a more fragile skull than other theropods, meaning that they couldn't bite and hold on to struggling prey in the same way. Instead, they would use their powerful arms to restrain, hold down, and possibly even dispatch their prey for them. Most Spinosaurids would have had a mostly fish-focused diet, but they may have eaten other small creatures in and around their territory when opportunity arose. However, as opposed to other Spinosaurids, it seems seemed that Suchomimus was better adapted towards land and not as adapted towards swimming as possibly other Spinosaurids were. This is something that seems to be happening more frequently in Spinosaurids, but even those who believe Spinosaurus could swim believe that Suchomimus was more suited to the land. Honestly, the best comparison of Spinosaurids to modern-day predators would be to compare them to bears, and Suchomimus is not really much different. They'd likely be shoreline feeders, mainly feeding on fish or similar creatures, but may have supplemented their diet more often than other Spinosaurids. They were the largest theropod dinosaur in their territory, but they did share territory with two other dinosaurs, Eocartia and Cryptops, both of which would have specialized in more land-based prey. However, with their large size and powerful claws, Suchomimus could likely steal prey off of either of the other predators, as well as taking the prey for themselves. They definitely ruled the roost. Truly amazing creatures. Coming in at number 5 is a very familiar face, but not a familiar name for many of you. This is Giraffatitan branchi, a massive sauropod that's very closely related to Brachiosaurus. For a very long time as a child, Brachiosaurus was my favorite, or at least one of my favorite, dinosaurs. The thing is, the dinosaur we were all looking at, including the ones in Jurassic Park and other dinosaur media, were actually Giraffatitan. Brachiosaurus itself was originally discovered in 1900 with a partial fragmentary skeleton that preserved enormous leg fossils. It would be many more years before any good material was discovered in the United States for Brachiosaurus, and because of that they were a fairly mysterious genus. In 1906, a new animal was discovered in Africa, and after several years of preparation it was revealed as what it was thought to be a second species of Brachiosaurus, but with much more fossil material. We are talking at least 5 separate specimens with multiple pieces from all the different animals, including skulls. It was these specimens that many scientists and artists would use over the years to create imagery for Brachiosaurus, even up to Jurassic Park. And so it was that for a very long time, Giraffatitan didn't even exist. But this was a case of mistaken identity. In 1988, paleontologist Gregory S. Paul reevaluated the material and believed that it wasn't in fact the same species as Brachiosaurus. However, his theory was mainly ignored by a multitude of other scientists. While Paul maintained his stance, it wouldn't be until 2009 that a revision of Brachiosaurus and Giraffatitan was done by Michael P. Taylor. Taylor compared the anatomy of all known specimens and found that Paul was actually right. He found at least 26 differences between the two, including a difference in overall size and length. In the years following, it was met with mixed reviews, but it wouldn't be long before Giraffatitan was a widely accepted genus. Don't get me wrong, I still completely love Brachiosaurus, but this is actually the dinosaur that we grew up with. From Jurassic Park to now, and even before then, most of the Brachiosauruses that you've seen are actually Giraffatitan. Just to help you distinguish them a bit better in the future, this tall head crest is seen exclusively on Giraffatitan, and in Brachiosaurus it's reduced. Brachiosaurus also has a longer neck and tail and is overall stockier and has wider set front limbs. But Giraffatitan was the dinosaur that we all knew and loved, and that's why it takes my number 5. Oh man, honestly, I don't even know where to begin with my number 4. I've always loved raptors. Even as a kid, they were always the scary dinosaurs that could go into buildings, and that both terrified and fascinated me. My number 4 spot goes to Utahraptor, officially the largest member of the Dromaeosauridae, though there may be another that challenges them for that title. Regardless of a new, bigger raptor, this animal will likely remain my favorite raptor for a multitude of reasons. Many people believe that Utahraptor was actually the inspiration behind the Jurassic Park raptors, but that's actually not true. Both Michael Crichton and Steven Spielberg based their raptors off of the real-life animal Deinocheirus, albeit upscaled a bit to make them more intense. Utahraptor was first discovered in 1991, but it wasn't named until late 1993, several months after Jurassic Park had already premiered. As of now, these are the largest and heaviest of the dromaeosaurid raptors, reaching up to 20 feet or 6 meters in length and weighing around 700 pounds or more. That alone is a bit of a game changer, and let me explain why. The giant sickle claws of raptors were not used for slashing as originally thought. In fact, they weren't very blade-like along their curve at all, but were rather more like piercing weapons. Most dromaeosaurid raptors are now thought to use a hunting method known as the RPR, or the Raptor Prey Restraint model. In this model, dromaeosaurids would leap onto the back of their prey, using their claws to hold on and dealing damage with their arms and jaws. For smaller animals like Velociraptor, this would allow them to use their claws as hooks to maintain a sort of balance while on top of the back of their prey. But on Utahraptor, this is much different. Unlike most raptors, Utahraptors aren't pursuit predators, but rather they're ambush hunters on account of their weight. Based on the RPR, when a prey item comes in range, if Utahraptor leapt on their back, those sickle claws wouldn't be used for just holding on. At over 700 pounds, even a 1 to 2 ton animal would still feel them hitting like a pile of bricks if Utahraptor could get any good air. Utahraptor's sickle claws are over 9.5 inches long, and by driving those into the vital spots of prey, they may have been able to take prey down without using their arms or jaws. With the RPR, even if the prey wasn't done yet, Utahraptor would be in a prime position to finish it off using its arms or jaws. Oh, and speaking of the arms, these guys also had unusually long and dangerous arm claws. The largest claws on their hands were thought to reach upwards of 5 inches in length themselves and may have been useful for slashing where their toe claws weren't. Their arms were just as dangerous as their legs, and all in all, Utahraptor was one of the most dominant creatures in its ecosystem, whether they ran solo or not. Truly amazing and brilliant animals, and I'm more than happy to place them as my number 4. Now, it's no surprise at all that I love Tyrannosaurs, but I bet most people probably expected me to pick Tyrannosaurus Rex, huh? See, the thing is, I love the T-Rex, but being big and scary isn't all I'm looking for in dinosaurs. Sure, I hype up the Rex because as of this moment it is the largest carnivorous dinosaur, but being big and scary only has so much appeal to me. Instead, my favorite Tyrannosaur is Albertosaurus sarcophagus. I can't remember where I heard it, but there's a quote that has always kind of stuck with me. If T-Rex is a monster truck, then Albertosaurus is a muscle car. They have many of the advantages of being a Tyrannosaur, but they don't really have any of the disadvantages of having all that excess weight that a T-Rex does. See, T-Rex needed that weight on account of all the big animals that it would have to take on, and while Albertosaurus has to take on some pretty big animals itself, none could contest with the giants of T-Rex's time. Regardless, Albertosaurus is a fairly large animal, still reaching up to 30 feet or 9 meters in length and weighing around 3 to 4 tons, about half the weight of a Rex. Young Albertosaurus fossils have actually shown similarities to ornithomimids, suggesting that they could run fairly fast. If you've seen my video on Tyrannosaurs, you know that young Tyrannosaurs and old Tyrannosaurs niche partition to reduce competition. This may also be the case with Albertosaurus, as young and old animals are built entirely different, and this is actually supported by their growth rates, which show us that Albertosaurus puts on most of their weight between 10 and 20 years of age. However, instead of having an ecology similar to a Tyrannosaurus rex, some scientists have proposed that these animals may have been pack hunters. Now, pack hunting is a very hotly debated topic, and honestly, personally, I'm not sure how plausible it is outside of small family groups. I find pack hunting more likely in smaller and smarter dinosaurs, but with tyrannosaurs, they may not have the mental capacity to pull it off, but there's a lot of debate around tyrannosaur intelligence, so we're not sure. Social constructs are often formed by more intelligent creatures, leading to a drastically different dynamic than we might see in the fossil record. The scientists who support the pack hunting theory believe that young Albertosauruses would have acted as the drivers, pushing prey towards the traps laid by the adults. That being said, there could be other explanations for this supposed group behavior outside of pack hunting. These animals could have all died at the same time to some kind of natural disaster rather than living in a pack. Perhaps they were mobbing a carcass in a similar manner to modern-day Komodo dragons, and at these sites many animals will often die, causing the predator's carcass to be left alongside the prey's. Whatever the case, Albertosaurus was still the dominant predator in its ecosystem, larger than any of its other contemporary predators. A unique and interesting tyrannosaur separate from their later and larger cousins, this was Albertosaurus, who takes my number 3 spot. Now this is one of my all-time favorite dinosaurs, and it seems it's one that I share with many others. This is Pachyrhinosaurus, and it's a ceratopsian that doesn't really follow the typical rules. They have a unique style of head ornamentation, and that really makes them stand out to me in a brilliant way. These animals were discovered in 1945 and 46, but wouldn't be named until 50, and it would be nearly 50 years later before people really started to recognize Pachyrhinosaurus. They were a fairly successful animal, in no small part to their amazing adaptations. They were big, like most ceratopsians, reaching up to 26 feet or 8 meters in length and weighing up to 4 to 5 tons. Another cool thing about Pachyrhinosaurus is that there are 3 distinct species known, making them the most diverse of the Centrosaurian ceratopsians. All 3 of these Pachyrhinosaurs share many similar traits, but most notably, they share the same boss on their nose. Most ceratopsians have horns on their head, like Triceratops or basically every other ceratopsian you know. But Pachyrhinosaurus has something special known as a boss over its nose and a pair over its eyes. These bosses are made of compact pieces of bone, making a rugose and sturdy area on the animal's head. Instead of having horns, they literally turn their entire head into a battering ram. These animals would grow rapidly early on in life, but their boss wouldn't be fully developed until around 9 to 10 years old, making younger animals much more vulnerable. These animals also lived in a fairly busy time with an immense number of different dinosaurs that we've discovered so far from the same time period. And Pachyrhinosaurus is one of the only dinosaurs that we can see survive shifts and ecosystem changes. The earliest species, P. lacustae, first appeared in the fossil record around 74 million years ago, before disappearing around 2 million years later, 72 million years ago. P. canadensis, the largest, most famous, and second species of Pachyrhinosaur, first appeared around 72 million years ago before disappearing around 70 million years ago. Finally, the youngest and technically newest species, P. paritorum, first appeared around 71 million years ago and disappeared around 69 million years ago. Pachyrhinosaurus can be used as a great example of how species rose and fell as better adaptations won out and times changed. Over the course of its existence, Pachyrhinosaurus encountered a plethora of dinosaurs, including Tyrannosaurids, Troodontids, and even the mighty Edmontosaurus's first rise. Their biggest and most dangerous predator would have been Tyrannosaurs like Albertosaurus, but even they would have had to been weary of that powerful boss. This animal can truly teach us a lot, and I'm glad many people are finally recognizing what an amazing animal these guys truly are, earning them my number 2 spot. And last but certainly not least is the dinosaur you all knew was coming, one that I've never been quiet about being my favorite. Giganotosaurus. Now, why is this my favorite? Well, there's quite a few reasons, actually. Growing up as a kid who loved dinosaurs, all the other kids who liked dinosaurs were always talking about T-Rex or Spinosaurus, and I never had the access to the papers I do nowadays to do all the research I do. Because I didn't really like to get involved in debates over which dinosaur was the strongest or the biggest and blah blah blah, Brachiosaurus was my favorite all-time dinosaur, so I could avoid those kind of discussions. However, all that changed when I went to a different school and met some new people who introduced me to a show called Primeval. Those of you who had Comcast in the 2000s may remember that they had an on-demand feature, which is where I used to watch Primeval. I watched them out of order, and one of the first episodes I watched had a Giganotosaurus in it, and from there on I started to research them when I was at school, and slowly it became my favorite dinosaur following that. I've only ever had one major issue with Giganotosaurus, and it's the same issue I have with many other dinosaurs, and it's simply the lack of fossil material. For Giganotosaurus, we only have one fossil that's around 70% complete and one very hotly debated dentary bone. It's only thanks to its close relatives like Meraxes and Mapusaurus that we can learn more about these terrifying predators. Current estimates for Giganotosaurus place them as the second largest carnivorous dinosaur, reaching up to 43 feet or 13 meters in length and weighing a whopping 9 tons. That being said, that hotly debated dentary bone could prove that Giganotosaurus was even larger, but as of right now, that's uncertain and surrounded by debates. Giganotosaurus has the largest skull of any currently known theropod dinosaur. By comparing it to its relative Meraxes, we were able to see that its head alone measures in at around 5.5 feet in length. Aside from this animal's enormous size, that's not the only impressive thing about them. Every animal, including humans, has something known as an occipital condyle in the back of their head, which is where their skull attaches to their spine. In Giganotosaurus, this condyle is wide and higher up on the animal's skull than most others. This would have allowed Giganotosaurus to move their head from side to side with exceptional speed, as well as the ability to close their jaws rapidly. In a study of the jaws of Giganotosaurus, it was found that they were more focused on closing their jaws rapidly rather than with pure power like a Rex. This was likely an adaptation to allow them to deliver multiple bites rapidly with their blade-like teeth. Unlike Rexes, who had niche partitioning and a staggered growth rate in order to reduce competition between older and younger animals, Giganotosaurus was thought to have more of a standard growth rate. As dominant predators, it was thought they were able to grow rapidly, with an 8-ton Giganotosaurus thought to have the same metabolism as a roughly 1-ton mammalian carnivore. Earlier, we were talking about pack hunting and how I don't really think it's plausible in larger and less intelligent animals, but it's slightly different in Giganotosaurus. Now, I'll be the first to say, they most likely didn't hunt in packs in any way whatsoever, but there are some pieces of evidence that point towards this, including what we just talked about. There isn't any definitive proof to show whether these giant animals hunted in packs or not, but the growth rates may give us a hint. T-Rex was thought to be a mostly solo animal, and its growth rates actually show us that. Young tyrannosaurs have different adaptations to the ecosystem that they lose as they grew into the giant and powerful predators that we know today, reducing competition between old and young animals. This was possible for Tyrannosaurs because they lacked any real competition. The largest predator that they may have shared territory with was Utahraptor, and even then, that's a big may as of right now. Now, adult Giganotosaurus doesn't have any real competition either, but the mid-sized predator role is filled by the abelisaurid Giganotosaurus, meaning young Giganotosaurus would have much more competition, especially if they were running solo. But the question is, how does any of this affect pack hunting? The closely related Mapusaurus, also from South America, was discovered in a bone bed of multiple individuals with various ages with no prey nearby either. Again, this bone bed has been hotly debated on whether it actually represents a pack of animals or if it represents some kind of happenstance where the animals died in a freak accident and all wound up in the same place. Packs tend to have few animals that are particularly old or young, and most of their members will be somewhere in between. So there is a possibility that Mapusaurus itself hunted in packs. With that in mind, turning back to Giganotosaurus, a pack would have allowed a young animal to hunt and eat at a lower risk to themselves, thereby reducing competition between them and smaller predators. Bringing us back to their growth rates, based on what I can tell, Giganotosaurus didn't have a staggered growth rate like T-Rex, who purposely delayed their full adult growth till about 16 years old. Instead, it seems they would have consistently grown for around 10 years until they reached adult size, but a detailed study in Giganotosaurus growth rates is lacking at the moment. If this is the case, it could show us that Giganotosaurus was a giant pack-hunting predator. If not, it could show us that there was in fact more competition between old and young Giganotosaurs than previously thought. Either way, Giganotosaurus is absolutely brilliant, and even though we don't know everything about them yet, I for one am very excited to learn more about my favorite dinosaur. These animals are absolutely brilliant, and there's so much that you can learn about them that we still haven't even discovered. Each and every one of the dinosaurs on my list are creatures that I've personally loved from my time studying and researching dinosaurs. It was hard to narrow my favorites down to just a list of the top 10, but I think I've got a satisfactory answer for myself at least. What about you folks? Do we share any of the same favorite dinosaurs? Please let me know in the comments below, and if you didn't see your favorites on this list, make sure you comment those too. Once again, folks, thank you all for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart, truly. Until next time, remember to drink some water, be good people, and have a fantastic day.